movies, which is why everybody was so stoked when he said, I've still got one more. And then he kind of lost his marbles.
Oh, no.
What happened is...
They did find corpses.
No. It's kind of hard to say because it's all very subjective. It's just a question of preference. As an old school horror fan who grew up loving his earlier stuff, it became really frustrating to have to say that every time he would make a new movie, it was disappointing. And they just kept getting more and more disappointing. But you love the early stuff so much that as a horror fan,
so
you
the other
keep saying...
two came out when? These other two?
They were in the late 70s, I think 1980 for Inferno.
But this new one was 2007.
The new
he was 27
one,
years older.
It took the guy forever to make the Third Mother movie. And in the interim, he made a whole bunch of movies. And if you're, to just...
Did he make the Four Flies one, or was that somebody else?
Yeah, that was one of his first movies. He made what was kind of called the Animal Trilogy: Four Flies on Grey Velvet, Cat o' Nine Tails, Bird with a Crystal Plumage. Classic giallos, all of them.
Classic giallos.
Those are more like straight up murder mysteries, but they all kind of have interesting, fantastical elements. But what happened is that he had this what you would sort of like generically call like his high period, like. The era when everything he was doing was really interesting and worth seeing, and I would argue
midlife or something.
It's kind of hard to say. I would say his last truly essential horror movie was this one called Opera. He always had an operatic streak, so it made sense that he would make a movie set in an opera house. And that one's this really interesting, lavishly done, again extremely violent and mean-spirited kind of giallo movie. After that, he came to America. He tried to make a movie here that was kind of noteworthy for how really not like an Argento movie it feels, and it's not it's just not very good. And then he went back to Italy, and I don't know. It was almost kind of like some spell had worn off, and just everything he's directed since then has just been varying degrees of like, all right, that had some...
But he gave you a big hug when you were young.
But, yes, and I'm glad I was at a screening of Suspiria and not, one of his later movies like The Card Player or Stendhal Syndrome, or these movies that are kind of distinguished by how not like his early stuff they seem. But there was always the promise. If you were an Argento fan, you kept saying, all right, for the last 20 years he's been doing these underwhelming movies. But there's still that one, Suspiria Part 3, or whatever you want to call it. There's still that one that he's got, that will harken back to his early grand days of when he was making awesome movies. We all kind of, as horror fans, kind of kept that torch burning because he kept saying, I will do it next year, it will happen, but first I must make this, bad made-for-TV movie. And then it would just like...
What's the one that he made here?
It was called Trauma. And it's very...
Trauma?
Trauma, Trauma. Although, actually, I think Trauma released one of his movies here, Stendhal Syndrome, which is forgettable. Trauma is even more so. But, yeah, they were just... These other movies that he was making, it's not that they were necessarily terrible, although some of them kind of were. They're just kind of forgettable, and they don't have any of that Baroque sort of stylistic flourish and creative invention that he just sort of seems to effortlessly do in his early movies. Deep Red is one of his greatest. Gorgeously filmed movie, and it's just effective, both as a horror movie and as this sort of, almost sort of, again, I want to say Baroque, sort of meditation on horror. He wasn't doing anything nearly that ambitious for the longest time. He made a version of Phantom of the Opera with Julian Sands that was noteworthy mostly for a scene where Julian Sands appears to be making love to a rat, which is kind of amusing.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yeah, but... and where was the delivery, Julian? Come on, you just sort of teased it.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go full rat, you just own it. But... Yeah, so, but Argento kept promising, like, all right, I'm going to do this Third Mother movie. It's going to be great. I've been working on the script I'm ready to go. And then it wouldn't happen. And then, like, a couple years later, he would say, oh, well, I threw the script out anyway. It was no good. And we're just thinking, well, it's good that you didn't film it then, right? It's like, oh, well, now I want it to be about this. And so it was clear, like, he didn't really have a coherent, like, I've been waiting 20 years to tell this story specifically. It's more of a, I've been waiting 20 years to make some movie that I will call The Third Mother. And what ended up happening, big red flag right off the bat.
2007.
They finally greenlit production, and all us horror fans were like holding our breaths, like, really? One, is it really going to happen this time? And two, what are you doing with it? Are we going to get Argento, who made Deep Red and Suspiria? Or are we going to get Argento, who makes movies like Argento's Dracula in 3D, which is hysterically bad?
That wasn't the one with the chick in the bloody bathtub.
No.
That was something else.
That was something else. This is the one
it was
where
Italian, though.
No, this is the one that just came out recently. It's one where Dracula has the ability to transform into a giant locust for some reason.
Okay.
Just, I guess maybe it sounded good in the script.
He's, yeah.
I don't know. Who knew Dracula could become a locust? Apparently Argento
He's supposed
did.
to become a bat.
Yeah. 10 million euros.
He's the original Batman.
Budget. It sure doesn't show. But so we were all kind of like, okay, Argento, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, okay, I'm really excited. We're going to be making this movie. Start shooting next month. The script is by these two American guys.
Uh-oh.
And a whole field of red flags went up right there. We're all, first of all, wait, you didn't write it? Because it's supposed to be your baby. It's your story, right? Like, you got these two other guys, and you look up the filmography, and they were these two American guys. As far as I could tell, they hadn't written anything noteworthy whatsoever.
Was it Kurtzman and Ariki?
No, but that would have been amusing. But, yeah.
No,
so
it wasn't those two.
It was kind of like, wait, so these two
bad,
other
but not
guys
that
who aren't even, have no real history with this series, have just come on board to hack out a script, and you're just going to film it. And I was just thinking at the time, like, oh God, here it comes. Disappointment, expectations,
senile or what?
It's almost kind of like right after he did the American movie, his creativity broke or something. Like he just sort of lost his zest to do these really ambitious.
Probably a midlife crisis or something.
I don't know. It's weird. I mean, he never stopped making movies, and he certainly still seems to be enthusiastic about them. It's just the directing choices and storytelling choices that he makes.
He's older than us. Right. Much older.
Oh, yeah, considerably. I mean, the guy was making movies in the 60s. But anyway, so they make the movie, and then it comes out, and I'm just thinking, like, okay, expectations set to, like, way down here. I'm not, because you don't want to get your hopes up as a horror fan.
I didn't see The Third Mother, but I did see Suspiria.
Disappointed. Yeah, well, you saw, Suspiria and Inferno are
I don't think
two-thirds of a great trilogy that completely craps itself at the end.
Inferno is the one with the barbed wire?
No, that's Suspiria. The hotel room one is Inferno.
Yeah, with the
key. They're both well worth watching. They're kind of Inferno especially is kind of a slower paced movie by today's standards.
Well, it's Italian horror, so it's different than American horror.
Well, it's its approach to
sort of
storytelling is, I would say, unique to Argento.
It's not jump scares.
Yeah, there's a lot more attempt at like atmosphere and
creepy blah.
But yeah, so he finally makes The Third Mother, and yeah, the reviews start coming in, and they're just like, "Oh God, we waited 20 years." But
20 years, wow.
And I was like, "All right, you know what? I have to see it. Of course I do. Just to complete that."
Because you said it sucked.
It didn't just suck. It's like. So it comes out on. I get the Blu-ray. I watch it, and I'm just watching the movie the whole time. It wasn't like
didn't even see it in the theater.
I was let down so much as it fulfilled all of my lowest expectations. I was just watching it the whole time, shaking my head, going, "Oh man, I knew it."
It wasn't even the studio.
I knew
the studio didn't even mess with it. It just wasn't very good.
It's definitely Argento's vision in its own way. I mean, the script isn't even by him, so it's like the stuff that happens in the script is just whatever these two guys came up with. but the weirdness of it, because it is a weird-ass movie. There's stuff in it that's just like, what in the hell is going on? There's a scene where the female lead of the movie is trying to figure out like why witches are showing up all over Italy and killing people for no reason, because they just sort of are.
They're witches?
And they're like really lame witches. Like Argento's idea of a scary witch is like a goth chick on a bus, basically staring at you, going hee 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 hee. Ooh, God, scary! It's just like riding public transit. I guess that's kind of scary, but. You know, but then this is intercut with like these really super violent, gory murders, like some of the most brutal he's ever filmed, which would be a recommendation if you were just watching a mindless splatter movie. But in a movie where you're trying to, one, make sense of the story, and two, you're thinking the whole time, this is supposed to be connected to Suspiria, one of the great Baroque horror movies of all time, and it's just like this
broken gothic,
bizarre, like nonsensical thing. So anyway. The female lead is like, okay, what's this mystery going on? Somehow, and I forget how, she ends up contacting the ghost of her dead mother, who pops up as this translucent woman standing at the top of the stairs going, ooh, you must be careful, there's witches, boo!
Really?
And like she manifests the young woman makes her mother visible by taking a scoop of like bread flour and going, pooh! And the flour like sprinkles down and makes a transparent outline of her mom going, "Oh, you must run!" And it's just like hysterically bad and funny.
I remember that scene.
Yeah, it's just like it's so
a scene that's been
cheesy.
done in other stuff.
And you just
probably
think,
not from that movie.
You just imagine a scene like that happening in Suspiria. It would have killed the movie. Like halfway through this otherwise masterpiece movie,
that's like a scene they would throw in a Bill Murray comedy. Or something.
Man, it played like a comedy. It was just like. And you realize that, like, the only reason this scene is even in there is because it's Daria Nicolodi, if I'm pronouncing her name right, used to be Argento's creative partner. I think they were married at one time. They're divorced now, but, like, as a shout out to the fans, they found a part for her in the movie. But it's like, if that's what you're going to do, don't. It's better to just not, because don't do a shout out to the fans that just sort of reminds you of how far you've fallen. So yeah, and then like the third mother turns up, and here's the thing: the mothers in these movies never entirely made logical sense. They're almost sort of more like dream spirits who can kill you, kind of like they're physical, but their motivations are sort of inscrutable. And in the first movie, it's like this haggard crone, and she's like disgusting and. You know, like the evil, wicked, witch in the woods that's going to eat you, kind of thing that they were going for. In the second movie, she's like this hauntingly pretty lady who becomes like the Grim Reaper at the end, literally, and it's really memorable. In the third movie, it's basically a hot chick who takes her top off a lot. That's it. That's the third mother that we waited for. It's like something that would be not out of place in a Showtime or a Cinemax movie.
Well, maybe not Cinemax, maybe
Skinemax. That's what they call it.
Well,
but yeah, and then like she ends up getting like squashed by a falling column or something. It's just like this fart of an ending to this like otherwise classic, trilogy. So yeah, it was just kind of like yeah, it's bizarre. I wish I could tell you because it's so disappointing and underwhelming that it's almost like a spoof of like what our worst expectations were. So sorry, Dario, but I can't follow you down that particular rabbit hole.
I wonder if he's still alive.
Oh yeah, no, he's still making movies.
When's his next one?
And every time he makes a movie, even after all of these years of at this point he's made more bad movies than good. You still think to yourself, somehow, maybe, just maybe, this will be the one that is a throwback to when he would, he'll be back on point on this one. So, somehow the magic will be back. It still ain't happened yet. I'm trying to think of anything the guy's done since Opera that I would say is.
You should get Del Toro to help him out.
Actually, they would make an interesting team up. And Argento has a long history of producing movies for other directors who do good stuff.